I woke up on Sunday morning, our 5th anniversary, and rolled over to look at my wife of 5 years, Rose. She stirred too, pulling my head close to hers and giving me a gentle kiss. Teasingly, Rose mentioned I had worn her out the night before. I explained that my plan was to get her pregnant, to which she reassured me, wrapping her arms around me and promising that I would get her pregnant, but asking me to be patient. We stayed in bed, talking as we always did, mostly about her work, with Rose determined to get promoted to regional sales manager. After a few minutes discussing her work, I suggested she take a shower, and she replied that I should go grab coffee, one of my specialties. I agreed and headed out, but as I reached the door, I realized I'd left my car keys. Knowing Rose kept a spare key to my car in her purse for emergencies, and seeing her purse on the kitchen counter, I decided to grab the spare instead of going upstairs. While digging through her purse, I found a zippered compartment. I unzipped it and saw something unexpected: birth control pills. Rose had promised she stopped taking birth control a couple of months ago since we were trying to start a family. Looking closer, I noticed about a third of the pills were gone, and the label showed the prescription was from only a few weeks ago, meaning she was still using them. I carefully put everything back, went upstairs quietly to grab my car keys without Rose noticing, and then headed out for coffee. On the way, my mind raced. I couldn't understand why she would lie to me about stopping birth control. I felt sure she wasn't cheating, as Rose spent all her non-work hours with me, and her closest friend was married to my best friend. I was fairly certain of her whereabouts most of the time, aside from work hours. Feeling disillusioned, I started to believe she might not really want children, despite what she'd said. By the time afternoon rolled around, close to 4 p.m., Rose snapped me out of my thoughts, reminding me to get ready since we were running late for dinner at Bill and Sherry's place. Rose mentioned that afterward Bill needed her help with something in his shop. Once we arrived, Bill noticed my distant mood and asked if something was wrong. I initially denied it, but he insisted, claiming he knew me too well to buy that excuse. Eventually, I told him about finding Rose's birth control pills, explaining that she had supposedly stopped taking them months ago. Bill suggested hiring a private investigator to get clarity, pointing out that only a few hours had passed and that I needed solid answers before making assumptions. On Monday morning, I contacted a private investigator we'd occasionally hired at work for security matters. After explaining the situation, the investigator assured me that based on what I'd told him, it didn't sound like Rose was involved in an affair, but he'd still run checks both during work hours and afterward to confirm. I also asked him to check on her medical records, as I figured that health issues could sometimes go unnoticed even with routine checkups. Despite my attempts to act normal, my emotions showed, and I found myself keeping my distance from Rose. By Saturday, she confronted me, asking why I'd been so withdrawn. Trying to deflect, I suggested she hadn't shown interest in intimacy lately, which led to a heated argument, our first major fight. I confided in Bill, who warned me that unless I made things right, Rose would start to suspect something. Taking Bill's advice, I apologized to Rose, blaming my behavior on insecurity. She forgave me but looked puzzled and somewhat concerned, making me wonder for the first time if there really might be something going on. Days passed, and I struggled to keep it together. Bill was a huge support, helping me stay positive. In the third week, as Rose's 25th birthday approached, I decided to plan a special celebration. Inspired by Sherry's idea, I settled on a halfway to 50 theme, complete with fun touches like a cut-in-half walking cane. On Thursday morning, I met with the investigator, expecting it to be a quick meeting, but it ended up lasting over 2 hours. After he left, I sat in a daze until my phone rang. It was Bill, knowing I'd met with the investigator. I told him I needed a drink, and by the time he joined me at the bar, I was already on my 3rd round. Seeing the state I was in, Bill remarked, "This doesn't look good, does it?" The initial shock was fading, replaced by deep anger. I slid a folder across the table to him, giving him a brief overview of the investigator's findings. Bill opened the folder and looked through the photos with their timestamps and dates, then noticed a CD inside. I explained that it was a video of Rose and her boss in an intimate moment. The investigator had advised me to watch it, especially to listen to the conversation. Bill called Sherry, asking her to take Rose out for what she'd think was a birthday surprise, suggesting a movie or a trip to the mall. Sherry happily agreed, eager to help plan what she assumed was a positive birthday surprise for Rose. Once they left, Bill and I watched the CD, and seeing what was on it brought tears to my eyes. The private investigator revealed Rose's motive for being with her boss. She was chasing the promotion she'd been talking about for months. We sat there in silence for a moment before Bill asked if I wanted another drink. After a bit, I admitted to Bill that if Rose had come to me, confessing that she had fallen for her boss, or that she wasn't fully satisfied with me, I might have been able to accept it. I acknowledged that, though it would have hurt, seeing her with her boss just to secure a promotion went beyond just pain. I was both hurt and enraged. I made it clear I was determined to let Rose feel every bit of my anger. Bill then commented that seeing Rose with her boss was like watching her be there physically, but not emotionally. He pointed out that she had prioritized her job over our marriage and would now have to live with that choice. Handing me a drink, Bill reminded me that the girls would be home soon and asked if I had a plan. I told him I believed I knew what to do. Looking at Bill, I continued, sharing that Rose's birthday was coming up on Monday, and I planned to throw her an unforgettable surprise party. Noting that I needed to act fast, I asked for Bill's help and suggested involving Sherry if he was okay with it. Bill agreed, saying Sherry wouldn't do anything to hurt Rose and could be trusted with planning, but added that she wouldn't be involved for that purpose. However, he mentioned that Sherry knew who to invite and that my presence at the party would be crucial for executing the plan. Feigning a little more drunkenness than I was actually feeling, I managed to avoid Rose when the women returned. The next workday, I spoke with a tech-savvy colleague in the shipping department, explaining my needs for photos and video, and he assured me it would be straightforward. I called Sherry and let her know that I wanted to use her idea for Rose's party but wanted it to be a surprise. I suggested hosting it around 3 p.m. on Sunday and asked for her help, which she gladly offered. I explained that she'd need to keep Rose out of the house for a few hours, and before we ended the call, I told her I'd reach out to Rose's parents. Next, I went to Rose's office to ask her to lunch, but she said she had a meeting. That was fine, as my real reason for visiting was to invite her boss to the party. I explained I was planning a surprise birthday event for Rose and would appreciate it if he could come, ideally with his wife. I mentioned that it would be a lively gathering and requested that he park at the nearby school so Rose wouldn't see the cars. I added that a friend would guide guests from the school to our house and expressed my hope he could make it. Later, I visited Rose's parents to tell them about the party idea, and her mom collected some photos of Rose from her childhood up to our wedding. That evening, I visited the computer guy at his house, showed him all I had gathered, and described my vision for the evening. After listening, he suggested an alternative that would create a stronger impact on everyone. I liked his idea, so I agreed, and he promised to have everything ready by Saturday. On Wednesday, I went to a lawyer and filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity. The attorney also recommended pursuing legal action against Rose's boss and her company, expressing confidence we could obtain damages from them. By Friday night, Bill and I sat across from each other at a table, and I commented on how things always seem to worsen just when you think they can't. Bill asked what I meant. I explained that on Wednesday I had spent more time at the lawyer's office than planned and, preoccupied with my marriage problems, forgot to return to work to submit a project bid. As a result, we lost the job, and I was suspended for 30 days without pay. If not for my boss knowing about my marriage troubles, I would have been fired. My boss, wanting me away from Rose and everything, offered me his timeshare in Mexico, telling me that if I wanted to keep my job, I'd better be in Mexico by Wednesday. Bill asked if I would go, and I confirmed, saying I couldn't afford to lose the job. We proceeded to discuss the details of Rose's surprise birthday party and the various possible scenarios. I described how the photos would be presented and my hopes for the night once the slideshow started. I asked Bill to ensure that Rose's boss couldn't leave, as I wanted him to witness everything. I also told him that the person hired as a bartender would be serving Rose with divorce papers, and her boss would also receive legal papers. When I got home, Rose was waiting, upset and demanding to know where I'd been. I told her I'd been with Bill, which she brushed off, saying it wasn't a big deal. However, she went on, arguing that it was a big deal because she had come home early with great news and I hadn't been there. Rose accused me of avoiding her, drinking excessively, and suggested that it felt like I had a girlfriend. My face flushed with anger at the accusation, and seeing my reaction, Rose looked concerned. How could she suspect me of having an affair while she was sleeping with her boss for a promotion? Holding back my temper, I remembered Bill's advice, apologized, denied her accusations, and asked about the good news. Excitedly, Rose shared that she'd received the promotion and would be the new regional sales manager starting next month. Her excitement spilled over as she hugged me tightly, bouncing with joy, and surprised me again when she pulled me in for another hug. With her arms still around me, she whispered, "Now we'll get that baby we want." Gently, I pushed her back to arm's length and asked her what she meant by that. Rose quickly snuggled back into my chest, explaining that our luck was finally turning around. She said she felt things were going our way, celebrating her promotion and proclaiming her love for me. She confidently added that I would be the one to get her pregnant, then looked up at me, seeking reassurance that I wanted this baby too. Rose noticed the tears in my eyes and mistook them for joy about the baby, but in truth, they were because I knew I was soon going to lose the only woman I'd ever truly loved. Rose led me to the bedroom, holding my hand, and we reached climax together. She expressed a desire to be close again on Saturday morning, and although I complied, my involvement felt mechanical. While I was showering, Rose joined me with a concerned look, asking if something was on my mind. She remarked on her recent surprise that she hadn't been able to keep up with me in our love life. I replied that she shouldn't ignore the possibility that something might be wrong, pointing out my changed behavior and increased drinking over the past few weeks. Shifting the topic, I suggested that perhaps I was at fault for our difficulty in conceiving, hinting that it might be a health issue on my part. Maybe I should see a doctor since you've been off the pill for a few months now, right? I asked, looking at her. Instead of directly answering, Rose took hold of me and launched into a pep talk, encouraging me to stop putting so much pressure on myself. She added that now that she had secured her promotion at work, she would be more relaxed too and, though she couldn't explain it, was sure I'd get her pregnant soon. I thought to myself that she could explain it if she wanted to. That night, Rose wanted to be close again, and this time I wanted it too, knowing it would be our last time together. I gave it my all, but I think she sensed that there was little love in the act, it was just physical. Sunday morning arrived, and to my surprise, I wasn't as anxious as I expected. While Rose was in the shower, I called Sherry to confirm that she had a plan to get Rose out of the house. Sherry reassured me, saying she was proud of me for throwing this party for Rose, adding that it would be one she'd remember for a long time. I nearly chuckled, knowing just how unforgettable it would be. When Rose came downstairs, I asked her what her plans were for the day. She looked at me curiously, asking why I wanted to know. I explained that Bill had called, needing my help with Sherry's honey-do list. Rose replied enthusiastically, mentioning that Sherry had planned breakfast for the four of us, followed by a trip to help her choose new bedroom drapes. By 3:10 p.m., Sherry and Rose returned to our house, and the crowd greeted Rose with a loud surprise. Taken aback, Rose hugged me tightly, thanking me, saying she had no idea about the party. Looking around at the guests, I heard Rose ask Sherry if she had invited her boss, and when Sherry replied that she hadn't, that concerned look reappeared on Rose's face. With my two main people in place, the party got underway, full of laughter and conversation. After waiting nearly 2 hours to make sure everyone had food and, more importantly, drinks, I got Bill's help to gather everyone in the living room for the main event. I stood in front of the guests, thanking them for coming and suggesting that we look at the first half of Rose's 50th birthday, before opening cards and gifts. Smiling at Rose's parents, her cousin, and her boss and his wife, I motioned for everyone to take a seat. Anticipation built as they settled in, all aware of the party's theme. I turned on the TV and my laptop, announcing, "Here we go." The first photo appeared Rose at 2 months old, lying unclothed on a bed. The room erupted in whistles and laughs as I joked about a nice spot on her, making Rose blush. As each picture slowly appeared, I offered commentary or asked her mom to add a story, leading to funny exchanges and more laughs. The photos moved through Rose's grade school and high school years, showcasing her determination. College pictures highlighted her ambition, including catching me, which got some chuckles. Then, a wedding photo appeared, with comments about my long hair, followed by a photo of Rose at work, at her desk, which she'd earned through her promotion as the top salesperson. Then, the screen showed a photo of Rose's boss, sitting with his wife at our table during a company party, with Rose next to him and another employee. But I was absent. Rose's smile faded as her gaze shifted to her boss, who also looked uneasy, exchanging a nervous glance with her. I expressed my hope that her boss recognized her commitment and hard work, and that he would help her secure that coveted regional sales manager role. As I finished, I looked directly at Rose, noticing the tension in her eyes since she had already revealed her promotion to me. I then started a video, introducing it as a tribute to Rose's hard work for her new position. As the images continued, everyone watched the video display an empty bed, followed by Rose's voice telling her boss it was the last time as per their arrangement. The video cut to Rose on the bed with her boss in a compromising position, with him instructing her on what she needed to do if she wanted the promotion. Gasps filled the room, and some guests began to leave as the footage shifted again, showing Rose in another compromising position. During this part, her boss smugly told her that with this level of performance, she'd secure a spot as vice president. The video had only been on for about 15 seconds, with another 15 seconds to go, but chaos erupted in the room. Rose, panicked, screamed at me to turn it off, crying and apologizing. Her boss tried to slip out, but Bill blocked him, landing a punch that sent him back to his seat. Bill called his name, and as the man instinctively turned, he was served legal papers which landed right in his lap. As Sherry tried to comfort Rose, she didn't notice the boss's wife approaching. The woman yanked Sherry by the hair and shoved her, causing Sherry to fall back onto the couch beside Rose. Sherry grabbed Rose's arm as she fell, which twisted Rose around to face the furious wife. With an insult aimed at Rose, the boss's wife threw a right hook, landing a punch on Rose's cheek and sending her tumbling sideways onto the floor. Sherry scrambled to her feet, yelling as she tried to grab the boss's wife, but Bill intervened, catching Sherry before she hit the ground again. I hurried over to help, but seeing Rose on the floor and Bill holding onto Sherry, I thought things were calming down. The boss's wife, however, was far from finished. She glared at Rose, who was now on her hands and knees, reaching to steady herself on the ottoman as she tried to rise, still dazed from the punch. She struggled to stand, her legs spread slightly apart. I reached Rose to help her stand and protect her from further assault, but just as I put my hand on her arm, I saw the boss's wife step forward and, like an NFL punter, deliver a brutal kick between Rose's legs. The impact was so strong that if it had been a football, it would have easily sailed 40 yards. Rose's body lifted 2 feet off the ground and 3 feet forward as she screamed louder than I'd ever heard, landing on the ottoman and bouncing off onto her side. Rose let out a scream from the moment she was kicked until she finally landed on the carpet. Once on the floor, she curled up with her knees drawn to her chest, hands pressed between her legs, sobbing harder than I'd ever heard anyone cry. Bill grabbed her boss's wife by the back of the neck, forcefully guiding her and her husband out of the house. As Bill pushed her out, she shouted that this wasn't going to help Rose's promotion. Sherry rushed over, kneeling down to help Rose, yelling at me to back off. Ignoring her, I approached Rose, trying to assure her I hadn't meant for her to get hurt. Rose was in too much pain to hear me, though, and when I looked down I noticed blood soaking through her cotton pants. I urgently gestured to Sherry, pointing at the blood, and she quickly told me to call an ambulance. I didn't ride in the ambulance with Rose, but instead followed in my car, feeling unsettled by this outcome. I hadn't intended or expected things to get physical, and now Rose was truly injured. Bill, Sherry, and I waited in the emergency room until a doctor came out to speak to us, informing me that Rose was being prepped for surgery once a specialist arrived. He asked me to explain what happened, and I told him she had been kicked in the groin by another woman. After a few more questions, he asked if I wanted to see her, but I declined. Hours later, the surgeon approached us with an update, mentioning he had never seen an injury quite like this. He explained that the force of the blow had impacted her at the base of the sensitive area, causing the tissue to rupture in multiple directions. They had managed to repair it, but were concerned about whether her intimate sensitivity would fully recover. I asked for specifics, and the doctor explained that the area played a crucial role in intimacy and pleasure, so if it didn't heal properly, it might make it difficult, if not impossible, for her to experience enjoyment in that way again. He said she'd be in recovery for a few more hours and then I could see her. I left the hospital shortly after, with Bill staying back with Sherry. We stopped for a meal and talked for a bit before I went home. Early Monday morning, around 7 a.m., Sherry called, asking when I'd be visiting Rose. I replied that I wasn't sure, maybe the next day. When Sherry pressed me, I ended the call and turned off my phone. On Tuesday, I went to Rose's room after lunch, where Sherry greeted me with a disapproving look. As I approached Rose's bed, I started speaking before she could say anything. I admitted that I had intended to embarrass and shame her, wanting everyone to know she was the reason for our marriage's end. I accused her of lying about being off birth control and being unfaithful. Despite my anger, I clarified that I had never wanted her to suffer any physical harm, and although I was furious, the idea of actually hurting her had never crossed my mind. I hoped she would believe me. Rose's eyes filled with tears, and I turned to leave, but she grabbed my hand, asking me to stay. Rose assured me she knew I would never intend to hurt her physically and pleaded for me to talk with her, but I refused. I explained that her infidelity had left my heart and mind in turmoil, causing me to make a critical mistake at work. As a result, The higher-ups were considering firing me, but my boss, aware of my marital troubles, had intervened to save my job. I told her I would be leaving for a month, as I had been suspended for 30 days without pay. My boss had offered me his timeshare in Mexico, so I planned to use that time to sort out my thoughts. Sherry insisted that I couldn't leave, saying Rose needed me. I looked at Sherry and replied that I had to go, emphasizing that I couldn't risk my job. I mentioned that Rose herself had taught me to prioritize work over marriage. Rose quickly apologized, and I told her there was one more thing left to address. I was far from done with her boss and intended to hold him accountable. I assured her this wouldn't affect her directly, but warned her that her boss might try to shift the blame onto her. I told her that the house had been cleaned and all remnants of the party were removed. On the kitchen table she'd find materials from the private investigator along with divorce papers. Hearing this, Rose squeezed my hand tightly, as if trying to keep me from leaving, tears running down her face. I explained that I left the material not to hurt her further but in case she needed anything to protect herself from her boss. I advised her to find a good lawyer and take care of herself. I was firm about leaving, telling her I had a plane to catch. Rose insisted she wouldn't sign the divorce papers until we had a serious talk. I shook my head, telling her she no longer had control, emphasizing that she had lost that privilege. I pulled my hand away, adding that her actions had ruined any hold she had over me. As I started to walk out, Rose called out, pleading for me to wait. I turned around and through tears, she expressed her love, asking if I'd meet with her once I returned. I replied, Rose, I can't. Being here with you hurts too much. Maybe when I'm back I'll feel differently. Outside, Bill waited to drive me to the airport. The ride was quiet, as Bill was already familiar with most of the events and my plans regarding Rose's boss. I asked him to keep me updated on any news about her boss, and he agreed. Bill also offered to keep me posted on Rose, and I asked him why I'd want to know. He laughed, saying it was because I still loved her, which I reluctantly admitted. I do love her, I confessed, but I won't let anyone walk over me. A second story: at age 32, I am currently divorcing my 33-year-old wife after discovering that our 5-year-old son isn't biologically mine. Just a couple of weeks ago, I learned about my wife's affair from 6 years ago, which her sister revealed during a visit. Her sister mentioned that my wife had confessed to sleeping with her best friend while drunk, feeling guilty afterward. Once I found out, I immediately took a paternity test, fearing the worst, and the results confirmed that my son wasn't biologically mine. Strangely, my perception of him began to change. He started feeling more like a stranger than my own son. Late at night, I confronted my wife while our child was asleep. Despite her repeated questions about who had informed me, I insisted it was none of her business, although I knew she would likely connect it to her sister, who was now starting divorce proceedings. This realization left her devastated, despite her repeated assurances that nothing had happened with anyone else since then and her insistence on faithfulness in both body and soul. I refrained from insulting her to avoid complications during the divorce, despite my disbelief in her blaming alcohol instead of taking responsibility. In our conversation, she threatened to demand full custody of the child. Feeling annoyed, I replied that I had no interest in anything that wasn't biologically mine, suggesting she keep the child while I kept our 2 dogs. She tried to persuade me to co-parent, asserting that I am still the child's father. In anger, I exploded, shouting at her to leave and take her child with her, calling him a fool. A week has passed since that confrontation. I am at home, which is in my name as a gift from my parents, while she has gone to her parents' house with the child and has not contacted me since. My parents are supportive of my decision, and my father believes I did the right thing by not raising someone who isn't my blood. I am currently seeing a therapist 3 times a week, who assures me that leaving behind what causes me pain is an essential first step. Emotional turmoil persists, and I am writing here as a distraction, as suggested by my younger brother. My sister-in-law confessed everything out of guilt, having seen me happy with my son, despite knowing he might not be mine. The revelation came during a moment of weakness when we visited her, which led her to break down with remorse. I harbored deep resentment toward my wife and conflicting feelings of pain and resentment toward the child. Despite this, I am determined to move forward and hope the divorce proceeds smoothly. Since we have separate finances and properties, if she seeks child support, I have evidence of the child's paternity, which my lawyer believes should be sufficient for any legal process. My therapist advises me to avoid seeing either my wife or the child, emphasizing the importance of focusing on my own well-being. The child is no longer my responsibility, and accepting this fact is crucial for my emotional recovery. Not much of significance has happened since my initial post, but here's a brief update. About 3 days afterward, my ex visited my house and asked to come inside. I went out to meet her at the door, making it clear that she would not enter my house while I was there. I told her that if she had anything to say, it should be done at the door. She practically begged me to take her son back, acknowledging that it was my right to cut off all contact, and that she deserved it. However, she admitted that raising a child alone would interfere with her dream of becoming a notary, as she is working in public records and is 2 years away from applying for a vacancy in the judiciary to achieve her goal. I attempted to explain calmly that my therapist had recommended cutting off all contact with both of them and asked her to leave before I lost my composure. Despite my love for the child, I told her I would not direct my anger at an innocent, especially one who came into the world due to her actions. I expressed this with some anger but didn't raise my voice, as we were in a public space. I emphasized that the child deserves better and that she is now responsible for providing that. We spoke a bit longer, with her trying to hold back her tears and avoiding making a scene, knowing we were in public and aware of others' opinions. Her final request was to at least be able to see the dogs, but I declined, believing it was best for them to adjust to her absence, as seeing her after so much time would only excite them. 2 days after this, she called me upon receiving the divorce papers. Answering was a mistake, as the conversation led to about 30 minutes of yelling, after which I told her to contact my civil lawyer for any questions, and then blocked her number. She hasn't come to my house or tried to contact me again. That same day, I reached out to a friend from my master's program and suggested going out, to which she agreed. We've been going out since then, and last Friday I asked if we could be an exclusive couple, which she accepted. She has stayed at my house a few nights already and has developed a fondness for my dogs, which is important to me, as I couldn't start anything with someone who didn't accept my pets. We're taking things slowly, as she respects the issues with my ex and the child and my decision to keep my distance. She asked if I would ever consider having contact with the child again, and I told her maybe, but only when he's old enough to understand my decisions. I assured her it wouldn't interfere with my life in the future. She was relieved to see that I was prioritizing myself during this process. Maybe this has taken longer than I expected, but this is an accurate summary of what has transpired in recent days. Now, for the final update, I am officially divorced. In my country, there's a streamlined divorce process called a quick divorce for cases without shared assets, joint finances, or children involved. This process occurs at the municipal level, bypassing the typical judicial steps like reconciliation and asset division. As you might expect, the only complication was our shared son. The paternity test confirmed the child isn't mine, leading to the removal of my name from his birth certificate, leaving him with both of his mother's last names. Describing the divorce process as challenging is an understatement. My ex-wife tried multiple times to manipulate the child's emotional state to lure me back, but recalling everything that happened helped me stay focused. I owe gratitude to my current partner, who has been a consistent source of support. Hearing from her that it isn't my fault has also been helpful. After numerous discussions with our lawyers, I proposed covering half of a nanny's salary to help her get back on her feet, which she accepted, agreeing to cover all other expenses on her own. I made it clear that I would not be responsible for her son's care, and she accepted this. Devoted to her career, she is finding the transition to single motherhood to be a substantial shock. Out of curiosity, I asked if she had spoken to the child's father she had, and he even stayed with them at her parents' house for 2 weeks, but they quickly discovered they had little in common, leading to conflicts. She had to intervene to prevent them from shouting at each other, and after a couple of weeks he left. Though she feels some sadness, she is a woman with a solid career and figure. With a year of help from a nanny, she has plenty of time to look for a suitable stepfather for her son. Meanwhile, I don't plan on speaking to him for now, maybe in a few years, or when he's a teenager. If he doesn't wish to talk to me, I won't push him, as I would understand if he holds any resentment. When we discussed the child, she expressed anger towards me, especially about how quickly I found a new partner. I thought it was rude, especially since my current partner was present, and I had to step in to prevent a fight between the two. Even though she signed the divorce papers and acknowledged my help, she couldn't tolerate my calm demeanor. Throughout the conversation, I stayed compassionate, but she, always proud of achieving everything on her own, seemed hurt and angry by my expression. I clarified that my look hadn't changed if she has a paranoia issue, that's her problem. The main thing is that she signed the papers, and I can finally move on with my life. For a year I'll be paying half the minimum wage, a fair price for peace. Despite some lingering resentment, I accepted it and moved on. Yes, I still hold some resentment, but not enough to say it directly or wish her ill. She already has enough to manage. I'm grateful to my current partner for sticking with me through this, even when I told her multiple times she didn't have to be involved or worry about it. She insists my issues are her issues too, and that I shouldn't bear it alone, which has really lightened my load. She also respects that I'm hesitant to rush into marriage this year or next, and I value her understanding. At least this chapter of my life is nearing its end, with no long-lasting consequences for me. In a third story, I was married for 16 years, together for 20, and we had 3 children. I discovered her affair by hacking her phone and reading messages. She had an affair with a coworker, ended it, and tried to work things out with me, but it didn't work. I filed for divorce in October 2018, she moved out in November 2018, and immediately resumed her relationship with the affair partner. Our divorce was finalized in December 2019, and she stayed with the affair partner until last week. Tearfully, my ex called, asking if I could take the kids overnight. Worried, I asked what was wrong. She said karma had hit her hard. Sensing something was off, she checked her affair partner's phone while he was in the shower, finding a series of explicit Facebook messages, similar to how I found out about her affair. She is hurt, and his new affair partner is a married woman, just a year older than her. Don't misunderstand, I initially felt a bit of satisfaction. From the start, I warned her that he was a predator. But after hearing her out, I realized she was genuinely in love with him, and a part of me felt sorry for her. Ironically, she apologized more that day than ever before, expressing regret for the pain she put me through. I took it with caution. I've moved on and found happiness with someone new in the past 6 months. An update: there was nearly a second instance of infidelity with the affair partner AP, but my ex caught him before they could meet. She now controls his phone, monitoring all his apps and checking his messages constantly. It sounds like a nightmare to me. She and the AP have a strange on and off relationship. Officially, they aren't together, according to her, and both their Facebook pages show them as single. She occasionally wears his engagement ring but would probably return it if asked, unlike with the $122,000 wedding ring I gave her, which she refused to return. She sometimes stays at his place but claims they're just friends. After all, who doesn't spend the night at their ex's place, sleep in their bed, and call it just hanging out? It still amuses me that she thinks everyone is so naive. Meanwhile, she had to change jobs due to her close friendship with the plant manager at her old job. They were always talking, going to lunch, taking Harley rides, walking during breaks, etc. Rumors started, and things got complicated. Her work friend is married with 3 kids, yet he still visits her occasionally and takes her on Harley rides to the movies or other outings. Our teenage son even caught her kissing someone in the driveway. Confused, he called me to ask who it was, and I pretended not to know, suggesting he ask his mom. He thought she and the AP were still together since he had just been there the day before, helping grill and mowing her lawn. Now there's a new guy, but she won't reveal where she met him. They went on 2 dates, though she didn't seem very interested. They knew each other from a previous job, and he kept talking about how he wanted to be with all her friends and coworkers back in the day. We were discussing retirement plans the other day. She knows I plan to semi-retire in 6 years, as soon as I'm done with child support and all our kids are over 18. I plan to move south to a warmer climate. She gave me a sob story about how she had to raise our children while I was busy building a business, and that she'll probably work until she dies, never able to retire. That couldn't be further from the truth. I put just as much effort into our home and family as she did, if not more, during the years when she was out partying with friends 4 or 5 nights a week. I replied, "You made your choice to leave me for your AP," and her face was priceless. I was her retirement plan, and now she's left with only $14,000 in her 401k and is in her early 40s. Even if she stays or goes back to her AP, he earns okay money but has no savings or retirement and lacks stability. So there's some karma in that. For anyone going through or about to go through a divorce, here's my advice. My life was turned upside down from October 2018 until our divorce finalized in December 2019. Now, years later, I'm happier than ever, looking forward to an early retirement and some beach time. My relationship with my kids has never been stronger. When things seem dark, stay a good person, don't lie or deceive, avoid bitterness, and don't involve the kids in your issues. Keep your head up and keep moving forward. The further you get from the darkness, the better your life will be. Stay strong, you've got this.